Recognize. Umbra Walker. D01. Recognize. The Caleb G. D02.
Hello, team. Thanks for listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files, episode 21. Welcome to the cave. I am everyone's favorite sidekick, Caleb, and I figured you don't want my help in the kitchen. Allow me to introduce Rich. We have work to do. Howard.
In the kitchen, without Caleb.
Yeah, because no one wants me in the kitchen. If you would like to get a hold of us, please reach out. There are so many ways. We are available on Twitter at the YJ Files. Our website is crashingthemode.com, and our show email is whelmedpodcast@gmail.com.
I didn't lie, exactly. I just left out the part about being a kid.
A lie of omission is still a lie. You kept an important secret from us. No one in the League knew the truth.
I did.
I shouldn't be surprised, since you indoctrinated Robin into crime fighting at the ripe old age of 9.
Robin needed to help bring the men who murdered his family to justice.
So he could turn out like you?
So that he wouldn't.
With that housekeeping out of the way, let's throw it over to Rich for...
Hello, Megan.
The title of today's episode is Agendas. The release date was March 24th, 2012. The previous release date was the previous week. We're still on a weekly release schedule, which is nice. The in-episode date is November 25th. The director was Michael Chang, and the writer was Kevin Hobbs.
We also have a huge list of talent in this episode. There are a ton of voice actors jumping in. You'll see why in a moment. Alan Tudyk is in there. Kevin Michael Richardson is in there. My personal favorite version of Lex Luthor, Mark Rolston, shows up again. Here's something I didn't know. Maggie Q is Wonder Woman.
Maggie Q. Who's Maggie Q?
Maggie Q is an actress. You might know her from Mission Impossible 3 or the reboot of the Nikita TV series.
She's good as Wonder Woman, but I don't recognize the name. Oh,
yeah, I
cool.
just did not realize that was her in that role. Chad Lowe is back as Captain Marvel. Phil Lamar shows up and does a whole bunch of stuff. Just so much great talent here.
Yeah, this was definitely a big Justice League episode as much as a team. So,
well, you know what? Let's get right to it with some mission briefing.
Just in time for your next mission.
All right, our pre-credit scene, the DC Comics Trinity, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are standing in the Watchtower overlooking the Earth. They start a meeting of the current full roster of the Justice League. We find out after the credits that the Justice League is voting to induct more members into the League, and they start with the milestone heroes Icon and Rocket, who we have seen nods to in the previous episodes.
We then cut back to the cave where Wally, McGann, and Zatanna are preparing dinner for Thanksgiving. Well, the girls are, and Wally's eating. Superboy gets an ultrasonic message from someone asking him to meet in Washington, D.C.
We cut back to the Watchtower. The Atom, the Guy Gardner, Green Lantern are suggested for the League. With mixed reception, we'll say. I love that guy scene. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's fantastic.
We then cut back to Superboy arriving to realize his message is from none other than Lex Luthor. Lex informs Superboy that Cadmus has created a new super clone. We smash cut to Superboy intimidating his way into Cadmus, where he confronts Guardian, Dr. Spence, and Double X about this new clone. They deny knowing anything about it. We also get the fact that Guardian is Roy's uncle.
Yeah, uncle. It is. Which actually cuts into a scene where Red Arrow is offered up by Green Arrow as a potential Justice League nominee as well, which plants the seeds for a conversation about age and appropriateness of behavior and all that kind of stuff for the Justice League roster.
Back with Superboy, Guardian gives him full reign of Cadmus, and we learn that Double X believes Guardian when he says he doesn't know anything about a new super clone. We also learn that the Xenomorphs are technically free, but have changed roles from weapons to basic manual labor. While Superboy visits his previous room at Cadmus, Wolf locates a secret door that leads to a vast room filled with clone pods, including one with a Superboy clone. Just right there, hanging out. Connor frees the clone, but it immediately attacks him. We quickly find out that this new clone is stronger and faster than Connor, and can also fly, and has heat vision. Superboy loses the fight badly, and then the security cameras go out.
Cut back up to the Watchtower. A debate breaks out, as I mentioned earlier, about the age limits on admissions to the League, as well as a discussion about why Dr. Fate is still a League member after his behavior. Of course, the reason Fate gives is that Zatara wants the League to keep an eye on Fate, which in the end makes some sense.
Superboy wakes up in a pod and freaks out. Dr. Spence claims it is because it was the fastest way to heal his injuries. We also find out that Match, what they are calling the new clone, has disappeared. Lex communicates with Connor through one of the Cadmus computers. He informs Superboy that the reason Match has the full range of Superman's powers and Connor doesn't is because the Kryptonian cloning process creates an uncontrollable berserker. Connor's Kryptonian DNA was spliced with human DNA to make him calmer. Lex then gives Connor a packet of patches called shields that he says will suppress human DNA and let the Kryptonian DNA come through purely for a short sequence of time. And this will give Connor power equal to Match's.
We cut back to the Watchtower again, where Plastic Man is offered up as a potential candidate, which starts Captain Marvel giggling. That interaction starts a conversation about Captain Marvel's true age, the fact that he lied about it, which was revealed in our previous episode, and whether he should stay in the League or not, because he lied. This leads to the reveal that Batman knew about Billy the entire time, and also leads to the brilliant conversation between Bats and Wonder Woman that we opened our episode with.
Back at Cadmus, Superboy knows Double X is hiding something. Double X has discovered that Match was not a new clone, but the first attempt to clone Superman. He also reveals that Luthor was involved in Match's creation and clearly lied to Superboy about it. Double X then brings Superboy to an underground complex he calls Xenomorph City. Double X has been liberating xenomorphs to live there completely free. He also brought Match there. Superboy argues with Double X about using genomes to keep Match subdued. Match then wakes up enough during the argument to see Superboy's shirt, which triggers him to try to kill Superboy again. Superboy gets his butt handed to him, but then slaps on a shield patch.
Back in the Watchtower, the League continues their discussion about age and limits on League membership. We find out that Miss M is actually 48 Earth years old, even though she's still an adolescent from Martian standards. They also talk about Superboy only technically being 1 year old, and does he have to wait 17 more years before he can join the League, etc., etc.
Speaking of Superboy, he wins the fight with Match, but somehow also led Guardian and the other Cadmus members to Xenomorph City, revealing the secret location. Superboy realizes that Luthor put a tracker in the shield case, ironically using the X-ray vision he gained from the shield to find it. He then faces Luthor, who makes the big reveal of where Connor got his human DNA from. Luthor himself.
Yikes.
Luthor then gives a brilliant argument about how, basically, he's the better father, and how Connor has more in common with him than Superman. And he's not wrong. When Connor gets angry and nearly punches Luthor, Luthor says a code phrase, Red Sun, to shut Connor down. Connor wakes up what seems to be hours later, and Luthor is gone. Connor threatens to throw the shields away, but ultimately, and somewhat reluctantly, decides to keep them. And with that amazing reveal out of the way, let's get right into feeling the Aster.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
All right, man. Why don't you go?
So a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, someone has asked me at some point in the past what my favorite episode of Young Justice was. I honestly cannot pick a favorite episode, but in rewatching this episode, this is now one of my favorites, simply because it is the culmination of Connor's full arc and development. We learn a little bit more about him. So much makes sense about what we got from him in the past. And this episode is also this brilliant back and forth that we've seen Young Justice do many times between action and a conversation.
Yeah. absolutely.
And the conversation in this case is just mind-blowingly brilliant because we've got this almost bottle episode of just a boardroom meeting.
Yeah.
But it's so cool. It's so cool to see these superheroes having a team meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And they get to like make nods again to and name some of these characters we saw in previous episodes, like all the heroes that were fighting the giant plants and that kind of stuff. Like somebody says like, hey, if we're considering Blue Devil, then we definitely need to be considering so-and-so. And there was even a discussion about like, also we have to consider the side effects of if we make the Justice League bigger, is that going to instigate our enemies into a arms race? Even though this Injustice Society or this Injustice League is supposedly disbanded, they still know something is still happening, but they just don't know about the light yet.
I really love that this episode was basically bookended with the Watchtower.
Yeah, me too.
In Young Justice, the existence of the Watchtower was unknown to the sidekicks and the team for the most part. We've seen some moments where a select few were aware of it. And now we are seeing it basically in its full glory at the start and finish of this episode. I don't think this is really crashing the mode, but no one knows about the Watchtower.
Right. And we had an episode, what was it? It was Cold Hearted, actually, where Wally says something like, can't the Watchtower just blow him out of the sky or whatever? And Zatanna's like, what's a Watchtower? And Batman just sighs, and he's just like, the League's orbiting space station is not weaponized. I love the fact that, Wally keeps screwing up, but also that this Watchtower is not meant to be a thing. I kind of like the idea that the Hall of Justice is a PR stunt. It makes so much more sense to me than, like, having this space where the Justice League meets and just having it be a big fat target for that city.
Mm-hmm. Let's real quick hit Mr. Guy Gardner.
Yeah,
everyone's favorite punching bag.
And here's just another thing that we've talked about in Young Justice so much, this idea that they'll drop these little bits and pieces of things that I think hopefully makes new watchers go, I don't know who that guy is. Who is that guy? I want to go find out about that guy, right? Asking the right questions. To have them say, I think it was Flash saying like, hey, we need some more firepower. Let's get this other Green Lantern on the team, and having John and Hal just both know, and just both of them like unchoreographed refusing. And for those of you who don't know Guy, he's made some appearances and he'll make some appearances again. But in the comics, when Abin Sur, who is the alien who was the previous holder of the Green Lantern ring that Hal Jordan has, when he died, the ring went to go find someone who can take over the ring, right? And it goes to somebody who has very strong willpower or an ability to control fear. Well, it turns out, we find out later after decades in the comics, that Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan were exactly the same distance from the ring, and the ring chose Hal. But then later on, when Hal was out of commission at some point in time, either that ring or a different ring went to Guy Gardner. So there's 3 Green Lanterns for the sector of space that they're in. And one of them is John Stewart, who is the Green Lantern we see in the Justice League animated series, who is a former Marine and an architect who has a lot of imagination and, again, strong willpower. Hal and Guy. And Guy has strong willpower, but he's also a raging jerk, and who we all love to hate. In fact, in one of the classic Justice League, I think it was Justice League International comics from, I want to say, the 90s, when they rebrought the Justice League together into this, it was almost like a comedy series for a while. It was led by Aquaman, had Guy Gardner, Fire and Ice, and some others. I think Batman, like, one-shot clocked Guy Gardner and knocked him unconscious because he was so frustrated with Guy being such a jerk. I love to hate Guy.
Guy Gardner had some great roles in Batman Brave and the Bold.
Yeah, they did a really good job with him in Batman Brave and the Bold. Made him jerky, but also, like, fun part of the story.
And I recently was reading the Death of Superman trade paperback from the 90s. And Guy is in that, and he has a power ring, but he is not a Green Lantern.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he became like some weird shape-shifting guy for a while. I think they called him the Warrior or something. And I think he became a Red Lantern for a while and some other stuff, so...
And I have also recently been reading the Injustice comics. Guy Gardner has a huge role in Injustice, and it's actually very impressive. So there is a fun version of him in there. We mentioned Jon Stewart in this episode. He has a quick scene there at the conference table. We talked about Justice League Dark the other day, and Stewart is in that as well.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's very cool to see all these different lanterns and characters showing up. Young Justice also in this episode continues to nod to a lot of the other heroes. It was cool specifically calling out Blue Devil because we had that great encounter with him in, what was it, Revelations?
I think it was Revelation, yeah, where I kind of went into a mini Secret Origins on Blue Devil.
So it was cool seeing him again and realizing he was not actually part of the League. He was just an adventuring hero at that point.
Yeah, turns out a lot of the people in there, Guy Gardner and Rocket and Icon, they weren't League members. They were just heroes being called to help. Yeah.
Yeah, there is so much more to talk about in this episode. Let's talk about Match real quick.
Man, Match. There is so much to love about Match. So, for those of you who may not know, for some reason, there is a classic Superman villain named Bizarro. And Bizarro was first actually introduced in the newspaper Superman series, I want to say in the 50s? He was a character that was first introduced there. He comes from Bizarro World, which is either another dimension or a weird square planet Earth where everything is backwards and that kind of stuff. In the Justice League animated series, he was a messed up clone of Superman that didn't work right. And I like that particular take of Bizarro myself. And in this one, it works out really nicely. You even get the scene where he tears off his shirt, or his shirt's torn, and he looks in the mirror, and then he needs to be Superman so badly that he burns the S-shield into his chest. But of course it's in a mirror, so he does it backwards, and so you come up with this, classic Bizarro backwards S burn into his chest kind of a thing. But the way he got to that point makes a lot of sense, which is really cool. The fact that they made this Bizarro, even though it's a clone of Superman, they made it Superboy's age and kind of folded it into the Young Justice universe's story arc that made much more sense, which ties it to Superboy, which is great because he's the main character. It's just amazing. And I guess we have to talk about some of the rest of it in Crashing the Mode, but I just love it.
There were two things about this episode that I didn't get. You actually answered one of them already in our show recap in the mission briefing. I was always puzzled by why the shield made Connor rage out.
Oh, interesting.
And in your explanation, really Lex's explanation, and I just wasn't putting the pieces together, saying that the clone process of pure Kryptonian DNA, they can't get it right and they just make a monster. That makes sense now to me. And I just hadn't put those pieces together.
Oh, gotcha.
But the other thing, I think I'm just looking at this wrong, so I'm expecting you to just tell me that I'm totally wrong.
Okay.
When Connor is looking through Cadmus and they're like, there's no rooms, look anywhere, take as long as you want, you won't find anything. And then 2 seconds later, he finds the secret room.
But he doesn't find it, Wolf finds it. So that's kind of where I looked at it, because it was Wolf who was actually finding it. And in my mind, I'm okay with that, because again, in our previous episode, we were just talking about Beast Boy and animals and enhanced senses. And though Superboy does have enhanced hearing and some enhanced vision and that kind of stuff, I would like to think that Wolf's senses have been cranked up to 11, and that makes sense to me. And there aren't any others around. We haven't seen that necessarily listed in the Genomorphs, and they didn't have any reason to be looking for anything. That's the other thing. They didn't have any reason to be looking for some other place, right? And
Also
all
true,
of this, all of the stuff that they have in this room where this match is kept is all rejected material and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe Desmond knew that it was there, and when he says, get rid of the source material kind of stuff in the first episode, what he really meant was we're going to store it somewhere, you know what I mean? Because you never know when you're going to need it kind of thing, which is super gross, really. Yeah, that's my thought process.
I'll accept it. Anytime I have something that I don't like about this or I'm confused about, I always rely on you. Just tell me how wrong I am and explain it properly. So
yeah, it's nice to know that you understand how wrong you are.
Yeah, that's fine.
All the time. No, but I think you're making some good points, because, again, when you're watching this a lot, you pick up little things that you might not the first time, and that happens to me a ton. And in this one, it was very clear to me, because I was thinking the same thing. It's a reasonable question to ask. But in this one, it's really clear that it's Wolf who finds it behind that biologic wall creep that we don't know what excretes that craziness. But yeah, that's my answer. That's my thought.
Makes perfect sense to me. Let's talk about the boardroom meeting a little bit.
Okay, cool.
It was great to hear them just flat out say, we need more female members.
Yeah.
I think it was recognizing the fact that comic books tend to be very male-oriented. A lot of the superheroes are dudes. So the fact that, I think it might have been Batman that said we need more female members.
No, it was Wonder Woman. Yeah, somebody mentioned Icon, and that's where the discussion came from, where Superman thought that Captain Marvel might have been Kryptonian and Icon might be Kryptonian, which seems reasonable because their power sets are very similar. But then Wonder Woman says, I'm as interested in Rocket, right? And having Raquel on the team because they need more female members would be great.
And then Canary and Hawkgirl speak up there.
I'm a huge Hawks fan, and they're really hard to pull off. There's so many different interpretations we've mentioned before of the Hawks, so many different origins from different spinoffs and reboots and everything. They can be really, really confusing to do. But the costumes that they have for the Hawks in this Justice League costumes are so good. Like, they've got that primal warriorness to them. But I want to see a really good Young Justice interpretation that takes all of these different origins and mashes them together to make sense. I want to see the primal warrior Hawk combined with the intellectual archaeologist researcher Hawk combined with the law enforcement Thanagarian cop Hawk. Like, I want to see all of that in one character that makes sense from a Young Justice standpoint. I'm fascinated to find out if Greg Weisman and Brendan Vietti managed to figure out how to reconcile all of the bizarreness that is the Hawk family.
The art style of the Hawks in Young Justice is really, really cool. In Justice League Dark, Hawkman is on the League, and he has a very similar costume, so I think they must have pulled some concept art over there.
Yeah.
We've talked about the Hawks many times before on Young Justice. They're in the League, but they don't really have major roles.
No.
Their stories are horribly complicated. We get it. They're not the focus of Young Justice. It's great to see them there, and it's great that the show creators have realized they're cool characters to have. They can be in the background. We don't have to kill ourselves including them and try to wreck the story.
Yeah, exactly. They have this intergalactic thing, and for those of you who don't know a little bit of the history, Thanagar has an issue with the planet Ran, which comes up later on, and so there's like a lot of stuff they could be drawing on to put into the show if they wanted to do it, but it can derail, and I think that's an important kind of nod in the Canary Debrief we've made before, which is it's very important to know what to show and what not to show, what to tell and what not to tell. And I think having the Hawks there, they're iconic. You know, a Justice League Adventure or Action, I started watching that a bit. They've got they've got Hawkman in that as well, and he's got the old school Justice Society of America Hawkman costume where he doesn't have the beak and stuff. It's just kind of a mask. Again, the Hawks have been around forever, so again, multiple interpretations and multiple versions. Just like there's a Jay Garrick Flash and a Barry Allen Flash and all that kind of stuff. There's multiple Hawks as well. But that was a bit of an aside. I just wanted to make a comment about it. I just love their look in this.
Also happening during the boardroom scene, we had a fun little moment with Fate and Zatara, and he is still in there.
Yeah, where he told him that he doesn't want Zatanna on the League.
Yep. It was cool to see that Zatara is still part of the equation, even though he has been taken over by Naboo.
Yeah.
We talked about that story moment in length when it happened, and we both agreed that it was very heartbreaking. So knowing that he is still there and that Zatara is not totally gone, I think is a nice little payoff here.
Yeah. And as we said before, like, Fate is not a hero. He's not lawful good. He's just a lord of order, meaning you've got to aim him in the right direction or that order becomes oppression.
So keeping him on the League to, more than anything else, keep tabs on him and make sure he is pointed in the right direction is good to know.
Yeah.
The other big thing that happened during the board meeting is the discussion about Red Arrow and Shazam and age.
Yeah, exactly.
Shazam reacting to Plastic Man.
Right.
Goes back to something we talked about in a previous episode where he's still Billy, even when he is transformed. We don't lose that part of his character. So the show has done that very well. He had a great nonverbal facial reaction when they started talking about age and age restrictions. And we just see that panic on his face.
Right. You see him raise an eyebrow like, yeah. Which makes sense. But that's the thing about Billy as a character, though, too. I love the fact, like Wally said, I love that there's a 10-year-old on the team. And though he doesn't have the quote-unquote maturity level, like he's not technically mature like everyone else, he does have the wisdom of Solomon. Shazam is an acronym, for those of you that don't know. The strength of Zeus and the speed of Mercury and all that stuff is in his name, and the wisdom of Solomon. Sometimes I think the League needs that childlike wisdom and perception to give them perspective. The Justice League animated episode Clash was absolutely brilliant, where they asked Captain Marvel to join the League, and he calls out Superman for losing perspective on what it means to really be a hero. And, oh my God, it's an amazing episode. And I love having that. And I'm so glad that they kept him on the team and that we get to hopefully still get to see that down the line.
And then the other big, huge, super duper crazy important part of this episode, Lex Luthor.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say. I loved it. From a genetic standpoint, it's a little odd, actually, but it works. And I think it makes a really interesting twist and calls back to some of the stuff from Crashing the Modes that you brought up previously in the episode where they go to Bel Rev and Superboy starts getting really what's the word?
Deceitful and manipulative.
Right, in these subtle ways that kind of make sense. But when you made that perspective of oh yeah, but if you keep in mind that Lex is his dad, these are things that might come easier to him than we might like. Which is awesome.
I love the fact that Lex uses the truth as a weapon.
Oh, and just gives everybody what they want. Just keep the shields anyway. You never know. You might need them. First one's free, baby. God.
This version of Lex, we've had this debate. We've touched on it before. This version of Lex is my favorite Lex Luthor.
Yeah, it's great.
He is so smart. He is so in control. He knows that he cannot hope to stand against these superpowered titans. And yet he is constantly toe-to-toe with them purely based on his charisma and his intelligence.
Yeah, I was trying to find stuff for my 3-year-old daughter to watch because she really wants to watch superheroes. But some of the stuff that we watch has definitely got a lot of violence is the solution to the action kind of a thing. And so we don't really want to have that at her age. But I downloaded the very last version take of the Super Friends show from 1984, 85 called The Superpowers Team, Galactic Guardians or something like that. There was only 10 episodes. But it was really interesting because Cyborg's in it and Firestorm's in it and that kind of thing. And the first episode we watched was Lex Luthor in his powered suit, driving a giant mechanical spider, breaking into a bank, like a super powered supervillain. And that's never, ever been my favorite take of Lex. And he never throws a punch in this series. He never does anything like that. And he's still absolutely one of the most formidable villains that they run up against.
And for that reason, we might be approaching on some dangerous territory here. That's why I like the Lex in Batman vs. Superman so much. He's a little bit kooky in that movie, but he's got all the echoes of this level of brilliant manipulator being built there. He's not the character yet. A lot of things are iffy about that movie, but that type of Lex is there, and that's why I like it.
Oh, yeah, we're going to agree to disagree on that and keep the show positive. Or I'm going to end up chewing my microphone into pieces. Let's move on to Crashing the Mode.
Hey, that's awesome. Well, you know what? No, before we do that, maybe this will bring us back to a good place. The decisions that the League made were based on trust and the relationship that the people have with each other.
I liked that statement of Wonder Woman's. Basically, it doesn't matter who do you trust to have your back. I think that was key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, not we want to go crash the mode. We got to do a debrief. I got some things to chat about.
I know. I got you so upset. I'm sorry. I hope that our relationship can be built on trust to move forward in this league of podcasters. So let's move on to Canary Debrief.
Stick around. Class is in session.
Caleb actually mentioned a little earlier, and we've said it a lot in these last few episodes, but the idea between balancing action with downtime. So this is a technique that Young Justice has absolutely mastered. The creative team knew that they wanted or needed to discuss a number of things about new league membership. I won't crash the mode as to why here, but suffice it to say that it is critical to the finale, things that happen in this boardroom meeting. Because they need to do this from a broad perspective, they know this, they also need to break up what is a boardroom meeting with some action. But they don't take any of that for granted. They don't just throw a bank robbery or something ridiculous in to break up this action. They move the bigger stories of the plot forward, and they achieve multiple things at once. Again, as I mentioned in the last episode, they've tried to start answering a lot of questions about specific characters, particularly the characters that are hinted at possibly being moles, right? So Miss Martian in the last episode. In this episode, we still have a lot of questions that we've been asking about Superboy since the very, very beginning, like the first episode. So why doesn't he have all the powers of Superman? Why can't he fly? Why doesn't he have heat vision? He has infrared vision, but not really X-ray vision. But the biggest thing is, like, what Caleb was talking about, like, why is he so angry? That's a big thing, too. Like, Superman is a calm, kind, generous person. He doesn't really go berserk. So why is Superboy a berserker and angry and angsty? Well, now we have the answer to those questions, right? So being able to balance this main plot point stuff with answering these questions that include a subplot about the team and the questions of Billy and Fate in the league, all of this stuff is all answered in this episode while still moving the larger plot forward and planting the seeds for what ends up coming in the finale. So we still have a couple more episodes where they're wrapping up these mole questions, but then we start hitting the final 2 episodes and all of this all comes together. It's just brilliant. So making sure that you're balancing the action with downtime and giving your characters and your players or readers a chance to process all this data and information is really, really important. But don't just throw things in to break it up. Use that as an opportunity to keep moving everything forward.
Okay, and let's move on to crashing the mode.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
As always, we are going to be spoiling Young Justice and things in the larger DC universe. If you have not watched the rest of the season or the series and you still want to be surprised, please stop listening and join us later. But if you are still here, we're going to move ahead and we're going to talk about spoilers. So, Rich, what do you want to start with?
I want to see Match again. I have to say, I think one of the things I was disappointed with in the second season, which isn't that big a deal, I guess, but man, when they wheeled Match out at the end of the finale in season 1, and Raish is all, of course, Match. And they never used him in season 2, which is interesting to me. So it makes me wonder, did the team resolve Match in the 5-year break and we're going to get a comic story about Match? Or was the Light doing something horrifying with Match for 5-6 years while we had the time jump and then into season 2 with the invasion? Does Vandal Savage have Match on the world with him and took him? Is he going to be trained and, well, quote-unquote, raised by Darkseid to be a horrifying weapon, kind of echoing back to the Superman animated series where Superman had his memory erased and became a weapon to attack Earth in the hands of Darkseid? There's a lot of interesting storylines that can be done with Match, and I want to see more about what happens with them.
I absolutely agree. That is a character I want to see more of. I've always liked Bizarro as that opposite to Superman. He's played for jokes a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Talking backwards and saying everything in opposite.
Yes.
But you can do a lot with his character. And I think there is a lot of opportunity in the Young Justice universe to have him be a more dynamic, dramatic character instead of just a joke.
Yeah, I think so too. And I like the fact that he doesn't speak, so we're not getting that kind of weird, mangled... I mean, I like Bizarro for what he is, but it wouldn't work in Young Justice. It works in Justice League, the animated series. It's not going to work here as well. Mm-hmm. at least in the way they normally give a take to him. I think it's also why we don't see someone like Solomon Grundy in The Young Justice either. I have to go check the comics and see if he shows up there. But again, great character in Justice League, the animated series, particularly his interaction with Hawkwoman, and that whole kind of Defenders Marvel Echo episodes were great, but we could talk about that forever. I don't want to get too much of an aside, but yeah, I absolutely want to see more match. There's so much you can do with him, and I want to see it done well.
So let's go over to Cadmus and the whole clone thing here. The one note I wanted to make before we jump into yours is that we again went to the well of lying about an uncle-nephew relationship.
That's true, and I didn't actually notice that. It has been nieces. Niece Miss Martian, niece Artemis. This time it was an uncle/nephew with Guardian, who probably thinks that he is Roy's uncle, right? At this point, he's still programmed, right? And here's the other thing, too. We think Guardian is a free-willed hero who is leading Cadmus and blah, 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 blah. But who knows what he's really programmed to do? And the thing that Double X actually Double X is telepathic, and he believes that Guardian doesn't know anything about these things. But does Double X know that Guardian's a clone? And what about Dr. Spence? She was probably involved, right? Or were none of them involved in Roy because they didn't know where the secret room was, and they didn't know that Roy was in the secret room? So maybe this was just entirely a Lex, Blockbuster, Desmond kind of cloning project on the side that Spence didn't know anything about. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. And this is another episode, even though we have not gotten to that reveal yet, where more building blocks are being put together towards the big surprise in the finale. We know that Guardian looks a lot like Roy. We know that Double X has called him brother, and we've proven in the fact that he only calls xenomorphs or clones brother. So there's more being put together that if we're really, really super paying attention the first time through, we're starting to have a lot of suspicion about who else might be a clone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're not paying attention, when we find out who is a clone in the finale, these are great puzzle pieces to go back and hunt down and see that, just like with McGann, nothing was accidental. All of this was planned from episode 1.
Yeah. And that's really what I was talking about earlier in the debrief, about the fact that they knew that they were going to have to get Roy on the team. So how does that happen? Right? And so I can see them sitting around the story room thinking like, okay, look, we got to get Roy on the team because then he's got to do his thing and like betray everybody and blah, blah, blah. But do we just have a conversation and have them invite him on the team? Or can we expand this out and resolve multiple storyline issues like with Fate and with Captain Marvel and with Roy, and plant seeds for new characters like Icon and Rocket and Adam, who becomes kind of a big deal in the second season, and like all of this stuff. They didn't just take the simple way out. They looked at how they could expand it out and resolve multiple or push forward multiple storylines all at once. That's what you do, man, when you do it right.
Absolutely. I don't think we have anything else here in Crashing the Mode, do we?
We crashed this mode pretty successfully.
Wonderful. So let's move on to a little bit of fan service for this week. Rich, what do you have for us?
Oh, actually, this one was yours, right? You found this one for me, so why don't you give that a go?
Alrighty, so we are dipping into the world of cosplay this week, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to point you all to a cosplayer I found on Instagram who goes by the name Dynamite Weber. The link is in the show notes, and as soon as you hit that link, you're going to see why Rich and I love this guy.
Yeah.
He has got outstanding cosplay for both Nightwing and Superboy.
Yeah, they're really cool. And the guy is also clearly ripped, so he fits the outfits. It's pretty amazing.
It is really great to see everything he has done. His Instagram account is all about all of his work. He's not just done these two characters, but these two characters are just spectacular, and of course they fit with what we're talking about. The level of detail in his work is just amazing. His version of Superboy is kind of a little bit of that 90s Superboy and a little bit of that future hypothetical Superboy we talked about last week from DeviantArt. He put so much work into these costumes. He must love what he does. So definitely check this fella out. The link is in the show notes. And if you do cosplay, if you do any kind of work, fan art, fan production wise, please get a hold of us. We love featuring our listeners and the community here in fan service. We always need more suggestions. So get a hold of us, find us on social media, email the show. We would love to feature what you do or what you are aware of. And with all that being said, it is time to wrap up this mission and head out of the cave. Thank you so much for listening and spending time with us this week. We truly appreciate it. If you have a second, we would also appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you choose to use. And feel the Aster.
Also, everybody, continue using our hashtags. Hashtag keep binging YJ. If you're discussing the Season 3, hashtag YJ3 or hashtag Young Justice Season 3, depending on how much room you have. Also, continue the hashtag by YJ Comics on Comixology so we can get DC to start producing more tie-in comics like they did previously. And if you want to help us get together more episodes, more Secret Origins, actual play podcasts, and more, please consider supporting us through our Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/crashingthemode. For just a few dollars a month, you can help us do even more with the show while getting some great rewards for yourself. And as always, stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our computer is voiced by Madison Ray. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.